from one end to the other. The question is not whether or not things are going to shut down and reset. It's how are you going to be able to flourish in the new world? Are your kids going to have the skills that they need to navigate this new world? Are you going to, also have those skills enough to survive and come out the other end? A lot of people are prepping and stuff, but I think they're missing out on some of the smaller ideas. I have a theory that I may have discovered not only the oldest, probably conceptual symbol in human history, but it's a symbol that all math comes from. So in a way, I can prove that human beings, at least Cro-Magnon man, has been worshiping math for, I'm going to say, 1 million years, if you add in the way that the modern humans' bones are shaped that seem to have come directly from farming. I'm going to say millions of years of human history. Now, we know it keeps getting reset, and we know we're in that point right now, but there's a symbol that could be put on rocks and all kinds of things all over the world where cavemen could just come out, and I'm calling them cavemen because we're all going to be hiding underground or, in these stone buildings or something like that, or something we've made if we're going to come out of that kind of event on the other side. So I'm going to call them cavemen in whatever epic we're calling the one after the Holocene here. And they're going to come out and they could look at one symbol that would allow them to expand their mind into all sacred geometry, all universal constants in mathematics. And I figured this out with a very simple symbol. And it's kind of a trip. And I think the reason I'm bringing up the symbol is because that's what we as a society need to concentrate on, is a way to pass down knowledge that doesn't involve governmental or authoritative powers trying to limit or critique or funnel the way you absorb information and learn things. Because we all know that the public school system should have probably been teaching us how to grow food and purchase land and maintain land at the kindergarten level. So yeah, I think that's where it's at, is accumulation of knowledge, going through not just prepping in the physical sense, but prepping for the future of mankind in the mental sense.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And, a lot of the sacred symbols too, like Meteoron's cube or the flower of life, these things are across every single time era of our existence here. But you're also right about that. Moving forward, a lot of people think the prepping thing is about getting this amount of stored food. Well, that's great for the interim, but what happens when your stored food runs out? So you got to think about the next generation of it, if you will, not in terms of a human being born for the next generation, but if you're going to grow food this summer, how much of that seed will you save to be able to bring your next crop up? I was contacted by somebody in Arkansas who wants to do a seed share. So they're like, yeah, you're up in Tennessee, you might have slightly different seeds, so why don't I send you a bunch from my area? And then you reciprocate in whatever you have, because I know you have a lot of seed. And they were telling me, I see your videos. I know you got a lot of seed, dude. You got a tons. And I really do have tons, like multiple tons, literally thousands and thousands of pounds. But I have a farm, so I'm able to get those 50-pound bags, and I'll go and I'll buy 1,000 pounds of seed at a time. So to reciprocate the seed, to think about bringing it to full fruit and full head, or whatever you're going to bring it to, full grain head. Like for me, for the sorghum this year, my whole thing is not about for silage or for cattle feed, because you can get that type of sorghum that grows 3 feet tall and it's just green plant, and cows love it, pigs love it, chickens love it. But I want to bring it to full seed. Same with the buckwheat. But then how much would I save to replant an entire field for next year? So am I going to need to save 800 to 1,000 pounds of my full yield to just plant for next year? But then I need to store it, but then I need to keep it free from pests, because there's things called mice and boll weevils and aphids and all kind of stuff that's going to get in there and nibble your thing. And how many beetles want to get in there and eat all your stash too? So it's all about bringing that to the next generation. Prepping is great, and please do get as much as you can together: food, water, metals, precious metals, etc., ammo if you can get it. A lot of these skills are lost, like blacksmithing skills. How many people know how to do that at the very basic rudimentary level of even repairing something? I was talking about soldering even something from Radio Shack that Ransom and I had reminiscent about here. I mean, how many people know how to get a soldering iron and a soldering wire and put two things back together electronically so the charge will go and then make your device work again? Not many in this day and age, not many. The deductive skills of what's wrong with the thing that broke to try to get to repair it again. Because I tell you, I have this catalog here. I bought this catalog. I was at a estate sale the other day, and I found this catalog from 1947 for farm implements, fencing, stoves, tools, and roofing from 1947. So, and it's crazy because at the same estate sale, I found this hand-powered tool sharpener, but it's a little sticky. All the gears work, everything works. It's just a little sticky one. So I'm using this catalog to see what it originally looked like to bring it back to its former glory. But the only thing I'm stuck at now is trying to how to clean the sharpening stone itself. These are kind of deductive things that if I would drop that device in front of somebody, they probably wouldn't even know what it was. And then you got to sharpen it by hand. What do you mean? You got to twist this thing by hand and sharpen it? Well, what? You know, it's so far out of the realm for a lot of people. So how many hand-powered tools do you have? Because if there's no electricity, you're going to have to do things without electricity. So for me, my whole goal now is to buy as many non-electric powered hand tools as I can. And I went to another estate sale where I found hand-cranked wood drills from different varying diameters. So I'm starting to accrue a little collection. I bought one of those Grim Reaper scythes as well, because if you're going to do your own grain and you got no electricity and there's no motor fuels, you're going to have to harvest it somehow. And I got a hand-cranked corn grinder as well. It's actually a corn shearer. You put the whole ear in, and then it rips all the kernels off the ear. It's more for food for like pigs and whatnot, but the box was already built with it. You just insert the ear of corn and you crank, and it rips all the kernels off it. How are you going to harvest your food? How are you going to store your food? How are you going to keep everything for the next generation of food? I mean, this is where my mind is already, like stepping back into the 1940s or the 1880s, because that's where we're going. If we lose electricity, I don't know, Ransom, what do you think? Like if we lose electricity, how fast would the population decline and by what percentage?
I think it would take about 2 years, probably 2 years for all of the people that rely on electricity to disappear. There will be people that adjust, obviously, so not everybody's going to disappear. You were talking about these little hand drills and stuff. You made a really good point about another thing that people don't think of, and they're storing this and they're storing that. But are you storing crates and crates of nails and screws? You know what I mean? In other words, if you don't, Home Depot's not going to be open. How about that? So you're going to have to use these old hand cranking tools and make holes and learn how to make dowels and build buildings without screws. And there's more and more of that ancient knowledge that most people don't even have access to, didn't think about. And then, I was picturing the futuristic version of those same things, without electricity. A hand tool that has like, a bunch of magnets in it that are spinning while you put it in the tool shed. And then there's little transistors on it storing the energy. So you just go out and click the button and release the energy there. I could see a whole world of micro super magnets running little hand tools and all kinds of stuff. And it's amazing we never went down that path. But as far as with no electricity, you got to think realistically. There are so many people that rely on air conditioning, heaters, things like that. And they've lived their whole life becoming accustomed to things like running water in the kitchen, a toilet that works, all of these things. I mean, that will completely devastate civilization without power because, they're not flushing toilets, they're getting dysentery. People that are diabetic can't keep their insulin at the right temperature. And then on top of everything, you got to think about the entire supply chain shutting down once there's no electricity. So all of the people out there that have become dependent on pharmaceuticals, I hate to say it, you're also going to go by the wayside when there's no electricity, unless you've been planning for this and you have stockpiles of what you need and you have ways to generate electricity, or maybe, like we were talking about before, caveman styles, preserving food, keeping things cool. If you live in the right part of the country, True, it does get hot in the summer, but if you dig down in the earth, that ground is going to keep the cool for the majority of the spring, where you still have refrigeration. You can put your food there, you can put your medicines there. True, it won't last all year, but you can come up with other methods like I was talking about before. You can get small solar panels and batteries and attach them. And like you were talking about in the idea of a marine battery style hookup, you could have a bunch of batteries being charged by these little tiny solar powered things that could run a refrigerator for quite some time when the power goes out. There's a lot of ways. The problem is how do we accumulate these ideas and put them into real practice in the world? Like you're talking about, you're always thinking ahead about next year. We got to be thinking ahead of the next decade, the next 2 decades. What are you going to do if is the main question? And most people never have an answer for that. And if they do, it's not a realistic answer. Have you ever watched that show where they kind of go out there and they grade these preppers on their bunker and their supplies? And then you got this guy judging them or whatever. You got to be doing that to yourself. And I wouldn't rely on television shows to ever get any super amount of real, actual, useful information. Most of that stuff's hidden away in books at this point.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. And also, with these estate sales that I'm hitting, looking for the hand-powered tools and looking for glass cookware, because these estate sales are such a vision into the past on how people in the 1940s and 50s lived. Because generally the family or the oldest of the generation, the grandparents that have died, that they're now selling their items, were still alive in the 1940s and 50s. And that's mostly where these households are coming from. Sometimes it's a little older in the 1930s. But it gives you a real good glimpse into, so these, like hand trusted items that were in the house. And the reason they were in the house is because they were the best of the time for that family to keep them in the house, to use those in the house. So for me, I'm thinking, all right, they've already pre-proved everything. And that's why it was in their house, because it was the best. But the books. I scored some really good books at this estate sale. It was the Encyclopedia of Gardening from 1952. The thing was like 1,000 pages, and it was $10. And it went through everything. And then I found another one from the Tennessee Bureau of Land Management and Forestry from the 1960s on teaching you how to build like 15 types of greenhouses using wood and plastic, with all the designs there, all the measurements, all the specs right there, everything in paper. So if your electricity goes down, you don't have to rely on the internet. Because, one thing is, I talk to people also who are prepping a lot, and they're like, well, we got like 16,000 gigabytes of stuff, and, we could have anything about anything. And what happens if your power goes down and you can't recharge your computers? What about in the evening? If you don't have electricity and you have lanterns and everybody can read, I want everybody at my place reading a different book in the evenings, talking, discussing about it, making a plan for the next day on how to move forward together as a group of people. And that whole 1840s thing, when you're talking about building without nails, personal story, before I bought the land I looked at, 30 some plots of land that we found this 140-acre piece of land. It was along the river. But it was really too expensive. It was way outside the price range. But went to take a look at it anyway. It had 2 barns on it. One of the barns was what exactly you described. It was built in the 1840s, not a single nail on it. The thing was like 30 feet tall and had these tobacco drying rafters in it, and everything had those fitting dowels together. Not a single nail in the entire barn, using cedar posts. And you got to realize, how big were those cedar trees they used? I mean, those things were 30 feet tall on the just perfectly round 30-foot posts inside there from cedar, tarred on the bottoms. You could still see where the tar was. That's 150 years ago. And those things, I know it had been, and it was kind of a little bit off center because the earth had sagged a bit, but still, how many people can build something without a nail? And what's the precision going to be on using a saw blade to do that? And can you resharpen your saw? So how many people are getting files to be able to resharpen things, sharpening stones, just the whole loop of things going back to the beginning of being able to even give you the tools ability to create the thing you want. So to even create dowels, you're going to have very sharp tools, but to have the sharp tools, you're going to need something that never ever breaks, like a sharpening stone or a file. Shit, those things last for 100 years. Yeah. And then how do you use it? You got to practice on it. Here's my whole thing. I am trying to sharpen chainsaw blades but I still have to use the guide because I can't get the angle right just freehanding it. So for me, I'm back to the thing of putting the guide on top of the chain so then I can file it down and get it to the correct thing. Until I learn that and I can do it freehand, just sitting out in the field. But still I'm miles ahead of people because I know how to sharpen a chainsaw blade, How many of us is it going to take into a community so everybody can survive? I mean, I can't do everything on my own. I probably need 50 other people that know skills to keep a community going where we could survive. Nobody's going to go through this alone. We're going to need double multiples of everybody who has specialized skill sets.